What's going on YouTube? So today marks 5 years that I've owned this 2003 BMW E46 M3. I've had it since about 160,000 kilometers, which is about, I want to say 100,000 miles. And if we take a look at the odometer right now for a mileage check, see that I'm currently at 264,000. So it's around 100,000 kilometers or 60,000 miles that I put on the car. In case anyone's wondering, this was my daily for about 3 years. The past 2 years, I've been fortunate enough to be driving my wife's car as a daily. So this is just relegated to weekend / spirited driving duty. So in this video, I'm just gonna go over the good, the bad, and the unexpected experiences that I've had with the car. Quick spoiler alert, I absolutely love this car. I wouldn't change a thing that I've done to it, but I want to give you my thoughts and overview of my ownership for the past 5 years. So shout out to Brandon from the Shifted Perspective. I got this idea off of him. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the good. The main reason people buy this car is because of that. The S54 engine. It is a legendary straight six engine. In stock form, this puts out 333 horsepower. Mine is tuned and modified slightly. Has the Euro catless headers, stock section 1 and 2 with the Eisman race, along with a Euro charge tune. So when I last dynoed it, it made about 310 to the wheels. Since then, I've added the AFE intake, and I'm going to be looking to get another tune from HT Performance. So I'm looking to do that sometime in the summer, so look out for that. And I'm curious to know how much power I'm going to gain from it. So anyone that knows anything about these cars knows that there is something called the big three. So what those are is the subframe reinforcement. These tend to crack in the subframe, rod bearings, and vanos issues. So in my ownership, I've had to address 2 of those issues. So I have reinforced the subframe. I've reinforced it with the reddish version 2 plates, and I've also changed out the rod bearings to ACL race bearings with ARP bolts. So that's gonna set you aside a big chunk of money, but it is something to be aware of. I knew this going into the purchase of the car. Other than that, like I said, any E46 M3 you're gonna buy, you're gonna probably be addressing those. Some people say if your rod bearings were done under recall, you don't need to change them again. That's a bunch of bullshit. My rod bearings were changed on the recall very early in its life, and when I changed them recently, they were showing significant copper and significant wear. So obviously they were due to be changed. So don't go into getting one of these cars thinking that because the rod bearings were done in recall, you won't have to do it again. Expect to have to do it again. With that being said, this motor has been absolutely dead reliable to me. I've had to change a couple of things, but that's mostly because of maintenance. So I've changed the water pump, thermostat, belts, pulleys, and a bunch of other small things. But that's to be expected with a car of this age and with this mileage. So I know this might be unexpected to some, but this motor, aside from the big three, it's pretty dead reliable. And I've known people in my community and other forums that have way higher mileage than me, and I've had no problems with it. So the next thing I want to talk about is in relations to the engine. It's the exhaust note. So again, just a disclaimer, I have the Eisman raced exhaust paired with the Euro headers and stock section 1 and 2. And to me, it absolutely sounds perfect. I can put a bunch of sound clips here for you guys to hear what the exhaust sounds like. So one of the bigger gripes about this engine is that sometimes it can be a bit difficult to get a good sound out of it. And that can be true if you cheap out on the exhaust. So straight piping or doing a muffler delete on this car doesn't do this car any justice at all. I know some people aren't a fan of the rasp, but I personally love the rasp. And if you aren't a fan of the rasp, that's an easy fix. They do have rasp eliminators from Status Group or even Beamer World, so that's something you can look into, but I personally love the rasp. So I just want to talk about styling real quick. So there are a few ways to modernize the look of these cars, and personally I think that getting angel eyes on these cars really does justice for this car in terms of modernizing it. It gives it that classic BMW halo look that a lot of these modern BMWs come with. And of course the grille. So this car is carbon black. As you can see, you get a bit of a blue tint to it in direct sunlight, but most of the time it is black. So the grills on this car, very classic BMW, nothing like the new G80s, which I don't want to get into. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot of opinions on the G80 and how bad it looks. My personal opinion, I think it looks disgusting. I never had a problem with BMW styling. I'm not going to say this was peak BMW styling. Personally, I think the E90s and the F80s, those look absolutely brilliant. There's nothing wrong with how those look. Personally, I think the F80 is probably one of the best looking M3s out there. But of course, I do love how this looks. It's subtle in many ways. Of course, you got the M3 side grills here. And the classic rear end. So the only thing that this car is missing, in my opinion, is the CSL trunk. So if anyone wants to hook that up, let me know. But yeah, I think the styling of this car is great. It's very personally, I think this is the right size vehicle. I know with each generation the car has gotten bigger, but I think BMW hit the sweet spot with this. That's why with the 1M and the M2, they're more or less the same size as this vehicle, and I think that's perfect. So moving on to interior, classic BMW, there's nothing really wow about this. Of course, I do have an Alcantara steering wheel, and obviously this is a 6-speed manual car. The 6-speed, I think, is the right way to go with these cars. There's nothing wrong with the SMG gearbox, but I think to get the full experience out of this car, you need the 6-speed. The only gripes I do have about this interior is that, like I said, it is a 20-plus-year-old car, so it is missing a couple of amenities, such as Bluetooth or any aux auxiliary. So I've had to do an auxiliary mod, and I know there are ways to do Bluetooth in here. You can get a head unit or a blue bus unit, but those are pretty costly. Things that aren't wearing so well, I mean, these soft plastics, they do have a tendency to chip and break apart pretty easily, but those are just consumables at this point. So those are pretty much the things that I adore about this car. Some of the things I don't really adore about this car, and somewhat unexpected to me, is, I know I'm probably gonna get a lot of shit for this, but the unexpected cost of both maintaining and modding this vehicle. So for example, the exhaust. So I basically only have 2 bolt-ons for the exhaust, the Euro headers and the Section 3 Eisman race exhaust. So those 2 parts alone probably cost me about $2,500 to $3,000 Canadian, okay? I'm sure you can get it cheaper. Some people probably got it cheaper, but that's just me. It could do something with the Canadian market. These parts for this car are kind of hard to get in Canadian market. We don't have a lot of vendors, and a lot of times we got to ship it from the US, and then we got to get shipping, and then we also have to calculate duties on top of that. So I can drive with the cost real quick. I mentioned the big 3, so like I said, I've done 2 of those. Those will cost you a pretty penny in terms of costing, fixing those issues. Things that I wasn't expecting in a good way was the Practicality. So it is a 2-door, obviously. You're very comfortable in the interior, especially the 2 front seats. What I wasn't expecting, excuse the water bottles, but the back seat actually isn't all that bad. So I'm gonna sit behind myself right now. And me sitting behind myself, I'm not that tall, so I'm about like 5'7", 5'8". I got plenty of knee room, and I got tons of headroom up here. So, I mean, I wouldn't stick someone back here for more than a couple of hours, but if you do need to put someone back here in a pinch, it's actually not that bad. So I wasn't expecting this to be as practical as it was. So I think you've heard me talk about enough about the car's looks and how it was to maintain it and the modifications I've done. I'm just gonna take you guys on for a quick drive and tell you guys the main reason people buy this car and why I absolutely love it. Sounds pretty damn glorious. So I mentioned rod bearings. One of the things you definitely want to look out for before getting on the car is making sure that the oil temperature is up to operating temperature. A lot of people will go based off of the coolant or the water temperature. You don't want to do that. The main thing is before you get on the car, make sure that your oil is up to temperature. So it should come as no real shock to you that the most prominent reason people get this car is the driving experience. So just sitting down, you are in a good driving position. Shifter is very close to where your hand would be in relation to the steering wheel. And the engine is absolutely glorious. Revving to 8K, telling you, it will never get old. You almost forgive the fact that it has no low end torque, because that just gives you an excuse to rev it out throughout the entire rev band. Doesn't get old, trust me, will never get old. So the brakes are kind of a weak point on this car. I did figure that out pretty early in its life, so you definitely want to invest in some upgrades to it. Obviously a BBK will be the first and probably be best bet for you, but for me, I've upgraded to the Euro spec rotors, which are slightly larger than stock. They are drilled and I have Stop Tech pads. So in the meantime, those are good enough for me. If you are doing significant track time or beating on the car more heavily than I am, then you definitely want to invest in some better brakes. So I mentioned earlier that this was my daily driver for about 3 years. So that did include winter driving the car. And I know I feel bad for the car. I definitely didn't want to winter drive it, but under my situation, I had no choice. So with the right winter tires and everything, it wasn't all that bad. Obviously ground clearance would be a bit of an issue. My car is lowered on KWs, so ground clearance was always an issue for me. But if you're on stock ride height, have a good set of winter tires, this car is perfectly capable of handling itself in the winter. You won't have a problem. In terms of other random stuff that's gone wrong for me, I've had to replace both sides mirrors. The actual glass, these tend to oxidize, I think, because of the heated function in them. So I had to replace them because they were pretty heavily oxidated. You get these like brown circles all around in the mirrors. So I've had to replace those. And stock, the actual shifter isn't all that great stock. I felt like the throws were way too long. It was notchy, and sometimes I would get stuck in the gates between second and third. So I don't know if that's something with me or it's just something that's common, but ever since I've upgraded to a dine-in short shifter, I haven't had that problem. It greatly reduced the shifting throw length. So if you are to get one of these cars stock with a stock shifter, definitely invest into a short shifter kit. So I know I talked about the engine being an absolute gem, but the handling of this car is up there as well. So obviously this has been, I've upgraded the handling a little bit with coilovers, but it handles really flat. I think the next thing that I'm gonna need is upgraded sway bars, because I can still get a bit of, I can feel a little bit of the body rolling, some body roll. That's definitely something that's gonna be upgraded in the near future. So I think the interior has held up well over time. Obviously, like I showed you, there are a bunch of soft plastics and other questionable material that BMW did use over its time that hasn't held all that well. Like the center console is completely shot. I've had to replace the steering wheel and the steering wheel trim. But I absolutely love these gauges on this car. especially with the adjustable red line. You have everything that you need. It's nice and analog. There's no digital display to worry about. The seats, while they're not all that bolstered, they are somewhat bolstered, and they are extremely comfortable. I've gone on hour-long, 2-hour-long road trips and haven't had a problem. It's very comfortable place to sit in, and overall, I think it's a fantastic place to be. But yeah, I just wanted to walk you guys through my ownership. 5 years. I can't believe it's been 5 years and over 100,000 kilometers on this car. It still puts a smile on my face every day, especially now that I'm not driving it as often. I absolutely love it. So thanks you guys for watching. Thank you guys for the support. I really appreciate it.